go ahead and record this. Just hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Supervici. I lead the Alumni Success Group here at the Founder Institute headquarters. And our role is to help your business scale once you finish the program in any way that we can. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a presentation of how we do that. It should take maybe about 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to share my screen and show you a deck and things like that. For those of you that are just dialing in, just listen in. It's designed, you don't need the deck just to hear what I'm saying. It's perfectly okay. And then that should take about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we can use the rest of the call just to answer whatever questions you may have about how we can help you. So it may take the whole hour, it may not. It just kind of depends on how many questions you have and so on. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. All right. Great. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So as I mentioned before, this is we're going to talk a little bit about the Alumni Success Group, how things go. And so this is basically the agenda for the next 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to introduce myself and my team. You've already kind of met me briefly. We're going to talk about various alumni resources that are going to be available for you once you finish the program. Talk about our series of Founder Lab programs and how we help you scale, select portfolio, and also just some best practices on how to basically get the most out of the help that you have here at Founder Institute headquarters. And then most of this call should probably be around questions and answers. So, all right. So this is us. So myself, I'm an entrepreneur. As a matter of fact, I'm also an alumni. So I graduated the program in 2010. I built a business for 5 years, raised money, and went through all the different processes that you probably have gone through. And then about 3 years ago, Adair Resi, our CEO, asked me to come in house and say, hey, you should lead the Alumni Success Group so you can develop programs and systems and things like that and products to help people that went through the program just like you. And it was just a great opportunity, and that's how I ended up here at the Founder Institute. And on top of that, one of the cool things about being here at the Founder Institute is that I just have kind of like this bird's eye view of a portfolio of over 4,000 companies now that have finished the program. So it's very likely that I have seen things that you probably have encountered just from like our entrepreneurs and the office hours that I do and the hundreds of companies that I help raise money every single year and all these other things. So there's very likely that I might be able to help. And if not, certainly I can connect you to one of the 13,000 mentors in our network that can do so. Mark Maltenban, he helps mostly on the partnership side. So all the various deals that we have and things like that. He's also extremely good at like sales and sales process. So he can help with email funnels and things like that, as well as various introductions to the FI network. Victor, he is our analyst. His role is also to basically help activate the FI network around you to help you, as well as to ensure that you get the help that you need, right? And so you see this email here right down below, grads@fi.co. That's a common email that we all get, and we read every single email. And so if you have any sort of a request or support or anything like that you need help with, we basically triage that and help you. In addition, our founder, Adair Resi, gets involved in pretty much most of the alumni success help, whether it's with fundraising, mergers and acquisitions, raising Series A's, things like that. So he's always available to do various office hours for companies and various programs, and we can talk about that later. But just know that our role here is to basically help you break out and scale your business in any way that we can. Essentially, that's how we look at our role here. All right. So as an alumni, you will basically get, as I mentioned, dedicated support from Founder Institute headquarters and our team, as well as working to activate the network of 13,000 mentors to try to support you to scale your business. In addition, we host these monthly graduate master sessions. So similar to kind of what you were experiencing now in the program, where you basically have a session every single week, we try to do one every month, and we try to go very deep on a very specific topic. For example, we'll go into fundraising, or we'll go into various sales process and things like that. And we always bring in basically an expert. We do this, it's exclusive for alumni. We do, and you basically can ask any questions that come up, right? And so that's the whole point of that, hiring whatever it is that you need. And we do one basically about every month. There's various private events that we host specifically for alumni. We have various private email lists, right, where you get promotions, deals, things like that, in our newsletter. And we also use this to try to help promote if you have like jobs that you're trying to promote and things like that. You're going to have a tool called Network, which allows you to search every single one of the 13,000 mentors in the network. $2 million worth of partner discounts, AWS, all these types of startup friendly tools, and most of the time, they're very deeply discounted, and in some cases even free to just jump on. One of the cool things about FI too is that as an alumni, you can go and go to any session that the Founder Institute hosts. So, for example, if you are in traveling or in a different city, and you want to meet some sort of mentor that is going to be speaking at a certain session, you could just kind of let the local leaders know and come in, right? And so that's really a very, very useful thing. I personally used to use that a lot when I was fundraising. I was able to get an investor to invest in my company by just serendipitously, quote unquote, meeting them at a Founder Institute session. And that was not in my cohort. It was actually a different cohort. It was the Silicon Valley cohort. And another thing that's really cool, this is basically the most unique thing, and I'm sure your local leaders have talked to you about, is basically this liquidity pool where basically everybody benefits, where everybody's essentially a shareholder in everybody's company, the mentors, the alumni, the local leaders, Founder Institute headquarters. So basically it's kind of like the whole entire community is essentially aligned around your success. And so that's a really, really interesting thing. In addition to that, I frequently write very curated and tactical guides, as well as other folks on my team as well, on like things like hiring, fundraising, sales, growth, whatever topic may be, PR, how to do PR correctly. And it's just like very tactical. Do this, and that. There's like no BS, kind of like just like the Founder Institute experience that you have, right? There's like just very little theory, right? It's just like, this is what you should do. So you'll get access to all that stuff too once you graduate. Another way we basically help is through a series of structured postgraduate programs similar to the FI experience. We call this the Founder Lab umbrella. And under Founder Lab, we have 3 programs: Funding Lab, Product Market Fit Lab, and Venture Lab. So let's go ahead and go through each one of these individually. All right. So Funding Lab is basically a 3-month structured program that's virtual, but it's very similar in nature to the Founder Institute experience that you've received, and it's designed to basically help you raise your first round of financing. The program's extremely successful. We're getting roughly about 90% funding rates within the 3 months that the program takes place. And part of that is that part of it is the structure. You have these weekly sprints, very similar to FI, and with the sole goal of you basically closing investors. And if you do the work and you follow through with it, there's a really high probability of success. In addition to that, you have a dedicated fundraising coach. That's me. I help hundreds of companies raise money every single year. Somebody asked me the other day, like, how many pitch decks do you think you look at a year? I was like, I don't know. I think it's probably somewhere between 500 to 1,000. Certainly a few hundred term sheets a year. So if you think about that, it's maybe 5 a week or something like that. So it's rare that I haven't seen a term sheet, but sometimes you never know. Sometimes, some things may surprise me even to this day, but there's, most of those term sheets I've done. I've also raised money myself, so I'm pretty familiar with the process, but in running the Funding Lab program, I've also just gotten very, very good at it. We're on the 12th version of this program. We've been doing this for years, iterating on it. So I've been helping literally hundreds of companies raise money every single year, help you with negotiating, building your pitch deck so that you have the maximum amount of ability to get meetings, things like that. Of course, we have, as usual, we have a lot of curated guides, email templates, and things like that. We also have a shared investor database that you can that will help you kind of build your target list better, expert webinars, Slack community, and things like that. And so the whole idea here is that the way this started is that many of our companies struggled to raise money, primarily because they weren't running a tight and fundraising process. And so we decided to basically build a program to help accelerate that so that you can basically raise your round very, very quickly. Now, there are certain criteria to get into Funding Lab. You have to apply. This is not something that you just kind of get into. But the criteria is basically the same criteria that you need just to be able to raise money in general, right? So if you see the list here, it must be working exclusively on your company. That's a prerequisite. So by exclusively, that means literally exclusively. So no side gigs, no consulting agreements, none of this stuff on the side, right? You have to be 100% dedicated to your company, because from an investor perspective, if you're not 100% working on your business, you're essentially shifting all the risk onto them, right? Because you're not willing to kind of burn the boats and kind of go all in on this company. So you have to be working exclusively on the business. You generally have to have a functional product. Again, that takes away some of the execution risk that investors will look for. Most investors do not want to fund product development. So again, this is just what the market is doing. This is not what Funding Lab is doing. These are not some random conditions that we just came up with. This is just what the market looks like for you to have a realistic shot at raising money from professional investors. These points here do not apply to you raising money from a friend or a family member or something like that. This is for raising professional money, okay? You need some level of customer demand and traction, and every single year that goes up, okay? So you need to be able to show that people want your product and they are willing to use it and are using it and ideally are paying for it, right? So this is, this varies again based on the business to a certain extent, but for the most part, just know that you're competing with thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs for the same amount of money, and many of them already have a lot of these metrics. The next one here is extremely important. You need to spend at least 25 hours a week exclusively working on fundraising. And honestly, just to be perfectly honest, that will go up to somewhere between 30 to 40 hours a week once you're ready to close your round. Again, this is not for Funding Lab. This is just what fundraising looks like. It's this hardcore, very difficult process where the average founder pitches 100 investors to close. So if you think about that, it's just a huge time commitment, right? So it's a pretty big commitment that you need to make, right? And you need to do that for over 3 months. And as a result of that, you basically need a team, which is kind of the last point I have here, right? Because, if you're going to be basically working full-time on fundraising, basically, somebody else in your company needs to be able to pick up the slack. Because let's say you have a meeting one with investor, goes great, awesome, cool, let's meet again in 2 weeks. You go back to them in 2 weeks and basically your traction takes a dive because you haven't been focusing on your company. That's a problem, right? And so that's why you need somebody else other than yourself to be able to work with you on the company in order for you to be able to grow the business, okay? And so this is basically the minimum criteria that we look for to evaluate a company. And then on top of that, we try to match kind of your market traction with what your current local market looks like for raising money. Also the type of business that you're building and what the investor appetite is and things like that, right? And so our goal is to ensure, we don't want to waste your time fundraising, right? And when we accept a company into Funding Lab, we're essentially saying, hey, we believe that you have a realistic shot at closing your round. That's essentially what we're saying, right? And so we want to make sure that we do our fiduciary duty to do you a favor to ensure that this is the right timing for you. Because if we set you down this path and you end up wasting all of this time trying to fundraise and you are not able to fundraise, that could potentially kill your business. So we take this stuff very, very seriously. But it's not at the end of the world if maybe the timing is not right for you in January or March or whenever, right? We do this 4 times a year. So it's not really that, there's always a program that's going to start in 3 months. So I've included a link here to the FAQ about Funding Lab, just fi.co/Funding Lab. You can learn more about it there. We answer a bunch of questions and things like that. So feel free to go and take a look at that when you can. as I mentioned, we're actually doing this 4 times now. This is a little bit updated, but basically we try to match the fundraising seasons. I think pretty much everyone here is in the United States or certainly in North America. So for you, honestly, these are the only ones that actually make sense. So fundraising has seasons, unfortunately. So summer is usually a really bad time to raise money because investors tend to be on vacation, and you're trying to create like a lot of like demand and scarcity for your deal. And if you have a really hard time getting in front of these people because they're on vacation somewhere, then you cannot create momentum in your deal. Same thing with raising money around now, right? Like once the Thanksgiving holidays and December comes along, it really slows down, and it slows down your momentum in your fundraising, and it's really difficult to pick it back up. Okay, so for you, likely is January or March is probably going to be the most likely scenario, if not August, right? So these are kind of like the top fundraising seasons, and we want to again maximize your opportunity to close your round. I mentioned before the program is virtual, although there is local support from like your local leader and things like that. There's weekly sprints similar to your FI experience, and there's just like, again, they're very tactical. There's no BS. Just do this, and that, and then we provide you with feedback on all those sprints. You'll also be broken up into working groups, and a lot of time people ask me is like, hey, is there any other equity component to any of this? No, all this stuff, Founder Lab, things like that is free, right? It's just all part of the FI experience, because if you think about it, we only win if you win big, right? And so we're basically creating all of these programs to basically help you win big, essentially, right? And that's kind of how we align your expectations with ours and vice versa. Again, structure, month one, we're going to basically be focusing mostly on getting your company ready to fundraise, pitch deck, investor target list, making sure that you're going after the right investors that actually have a realistic shot at funding your business. Like, I see this a lot where companies go after the wrong investors, and as a result, it's just not a good use of anybody's time. A data room, this is basically all the information that you will need in order to pass diligence from investors. So cap table, all of your contracts, agreements, making sure your company's incorporated correctly, all the stuff that, like the worst thing that could happen is that you actually do all this really hard work pitching an investor, and then, you get into diligence and they pass on the deal after they said yes, because something in your diligence didn't work out. Month two, you're going to be going on like this really hard, very difficult, and also, very time-consuming fundraising sprint. You're going to be pitching roughly 50 investors. This is what the average company right now in Funding Lab is pitching. And then in month three, you're going to be basically closing. Hopefully by that point, you should have some folks that are interested. And then we basically help you with the strategy, help you with term sheet negotiations, the entire closing process and things like that. And we do that via office hours, via Slack. We're basically just there for you to kind of help you throughout the entire process. Think of it like that. Right? So that's the Funding Lab program. In addition, we have another program that we recently launched called Product Market Fit Lab. Okay, so the whole point of Product Market Fit Lab is to basically help you create the engine in your business to help you get to product market fit faster. So month one, we're going to be taking a lot of the work that you're doing right now in your current cohort and really help you dive in a little bit more. So you're going to be focused on finding out who the customer is, creating a product that actually makes sense for that customer, and then testing that out, and building out the product. Month two, you're going to be launching that product if you haven't already. For those of you that have launched products, we'll probably have to improve it or iterate on it, just so that we can get you closer to product market fit, help you improve your KPIs and things like that. And in month three, we basically help you do more market test growth. And at that point, hopefully you should be generating revenue, and that should be growing over time. And the idea is that if you go through this process, you'll be able to kind of like instrument your entire business to kind of follow this process moving forward until you get to product market fit faster, and get you to start breaking out. Again, similar structure to Funding Lab in that perspective. Slack group, one-on-one advice. We're going to have like virtual sessions with various experts and things like that on certain topics, and our team here is basically there to try to help you at every step of the way. Also, again, structured process, weekly sprints, delivered, via the FI system and things like that. So that's essentially kind of like what the structured product market fit lab looks like. And then once you have actually broken out, so this is for companies that have already gotten to product market fit, they're ready to go out and raise that $5 million, whatever, $10 million Series A. We have another program there designed to basically help you raise your Series A. This is generally a 6-month, almost concierge-like program, because at that point, you're a pretty developed business. You probably have 20 employees, probably more. So we kind of work around your time a little bit more there. You're doing strategy calls with myself as well as our CEO, Adair Ressi, who's also one of the top fundraising experts in the world, particularly at this level. We have several dedicated FI mentor advisors to help you close the Series A round, materials, review, all that advice, and then introductions to Series A's VCs. The Series A is an extremely difficult, extremely comprehensive process. It's not like raising a seed round in any way. It takes a lot more work, a lot more diligence, a lot more everything, just because there's a lot more money involved, right? So we basically will kind of hold your hand through that entire process, particularly if it's the first time you've ever done something like this. So that's just more. I'm just introducing this here. Most of you probably won't be at this level probably for a year or two, but just FYI, just so you know that it's there. All right. Last year here's the program here is called a Select Portfolio Program. So what we have done is this is a program specifically to like the top 2% of FI alumni worldwide. These are companies with pretty strong product market fit. They've most likely have gone through one of our programs before, have worked with us for a while. We know you're doing really well. You're breaking out. And for companies in the Select portfolio, we basically provide you with priority support, right? So anytime there's a demo day available, the Select portfolio companies get to go first. If there's, any sort of opportunity that comes our way, like, hey, so-and-so XYZ company is looking to basically partner with XYZ startups, that we look for Select portfolio companies. They receive basically priority support from us. It's the best way to kind of think about this. So if you're kind of like already starting to break out, that's when we basically double down on you and try to basically help you really take your business to the next level. I have somebody on my team that will literally go in and curate and work through the FI network specifically for a company that's in the Select portfolio program. Again, the biggest benefits are just lots of like introductions, right? It's much easier for us to introduce a Select portfolio company to a top mentor because we know the company is extremely good, the founder is extremely good, and so we know that it's going to be a good introduction both ways. We also help with business development. We have a lot of partners, for example, that want to partner with us to reach alumni. Well, we work those partnerships backwards. Oh, you need a contact at Amazon? Well, great. Well, we know somebody at Amazon because they want to work with us with startups, but then we can kind of get you in the door that way. For example, right? Same thing with the sales front. PR features on our blog. Our blog has incredible like SEO, incredible reach, as well as introducing you to various people or various publications, fundraising, M&A. Like once you're ready to kind of get your company acquired, we will help you through that entire process. That's also just a very difficult thing. Unlimited office hours and priority access for, PR and things like that. All right. So finally here, and then we can kind of open this up to, for questions. Basically, one thing that I always want to leave everybody with, and I hope that you will remember this after you finish the program, is basically how to maximize us, right? So as a general rule, like something for you to kind of think through is that we can't help you unless we know what's going on with your company, right? It just kind of makes sense, right? Like if we don't know what's going on with your company, there's nothing that we can do to help. And so when we look at the top portfolio companies in the Founders Network right now, and we're up to 4,000 alumni companies now, they also send monthly regular updates to the people involved in their company, shareholders, advisors, investors, whatever, even friends sometimes, right? they are in this like very diligent process where they send a monthly update with how the business is going, both good and bad, right? This is very important. The reason for this is that, if we know that if we know that something is not going right in your business, we can proactively interact with you and try to help you fix that problem. I can't tell you how often we get emails from founders with 2 or 3 weeks of cash left, asking us for help. And it's just that puts us in a really tough spot, because it's just really difficult for us to help you when you only have 3 weeks of cash left. But if you have 2 months of cash left or a month of cash left, we can help you reduce the burn and hopefully figure out a way to get some more money into the business, as well as potentially introduce you to some folks that can help. Right. And so being proactive rather than reactive is the most important thing. And, you're going to get caught up in your business. You're going to be doing all these different things, blah, blah, blah. I get it. I've been there myself, but this is super important. If you can just get yourself in a habit of updating us, updating everybody that's involved, that would really, really help us. Also, like if you want us to promote you, right? Like help us promote you. We are very incentivized to want to promote you, right? Like, if you think about our business is like helping create really great companies, and so we definitely want to show off your success. That helps us too. And so anytime you have any interesting news or somebody like featured you or something like that, just email us and then we'll share that out with you. Mentioning us on social media, that's also great, right? Because if we retweet something for you or we share it for you on LinkedIn, we will increase your reach by 10x, sometimes more. I mean, we did a LinkedIn campaign for an alumni the other day, and I think we got like 10,000 impressions in like a day, right? And so we can help you with that. And writing a blog post about your FI experience is also a good way to do that, right? So, in short, basically we're here to help. Our entire program, our entire system is designed to kind of help you scale in any way that we can, and we want to help you however we can. All right. So now what I'd like to do is open this up for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. All right, great. So if you have any questions, the easiest way to do it is probably to just relay them in the chat room here, unless you've called into this into this talk. And if so, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any sort of questions that come up. What are the requirements to apply for product market fit lab? So good question. This is from Alex. And then when does product market fit lab start? Okay, so product market fit lab started yesterday, and then the next one will start in probably like in January. That's kind of the timing we're looking at now. As far as the requirements right now is, we basically want to ensure that you have you are able to dedicate a minimum of 25 to 30 hours a week on your business, and that's the key requirement right now. Other than that, we're not as strict about the requirements because, again, this is a very different thing than fundraising, right? Like you can try to get to product market fit even if you haven't gone all in on your business, although it is a little bit faster for sure if you're able to make that transition. No, you cannot still apply for the program. This is for alumni, right? So once you graduate the program, then you'll be able to apply to any of these programs. Other questions? For companies outside the U.S., how has success been? I don't know how to answer that question. Can you please? What do you mean by that? Are you trying to say if they're?
Yeah, I'm just gonna unmute and say it. Might be easier.
For sure.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was just curious, like so first of all, these programs are run remotely, I assume.
Yes.
Okay. So has there been? I'm just curious if there's like a trend of like the companies in the U.S. Seeing more success because of the network, like how large the network is in the States versus companies outside of the U.S. I'm just curious.
No, I mean, so we operate in 180 cities worldwide, and most of the companies in our portfolio are outside of the United States. And so that there's pros and cons to both. Like, I mean, as far as like funding lab, it's usually 70% of the companies that close their rounds are outside the United States. But that's also just because the way the companies come in at that time, right? And when the companies finish the program and things like that. So success, it's hard to define, I guess, but if you want to look at like exits and things like that, we've had several very large exits all over the world, Europe, Asia, wherever, Latam even now. So that, I don't know, I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages, right? Like the advantage of being outside the US is that you are likely going to be one of the better companies in your ecosystem. And as a result, you kind of like come up, just naturally go to the top, right? The disadvantage is that maybe it's a little bit harder to kind of network your way and find investors and things like that. But again, it's really all about like the founder and the perseverance of the founder. If there's any common denominator for any of this, is basically perseverance is the key. Um,
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay.
there's a question from Colombia. What are the pitfalls you've seen in due diligence process? How can we plan ahead? Well, the biggest one is that people aren't assigning intellectual property correctly, right? So you'll have some person that randomly worked on your company, and you know you didn't get them to sign an intellectual property assignment, right? And then that comes up in diligence. You're like, oh well, this person did this, and they used this JavaScript thing in my code, and it didn't really work. So that's number one. Number two is just not being organized about it. Okay. All right. So you did. So this happens probably the most actually, right? So you know we do this in funding lab. We're like, hey, you should do this. You're like, hey, do this, please create your data room and all that. And they're like, I'll just wait. And then a person comes in and says, yes, I'm in. Let's do it. I want to go and invest in your company, $50,000. Can I see your data room? And then they're like scrambling like the whole weekend to go do that. And there's all this employee agreements and other types of agreements that need to be signed. Cap table is like completely screwed up because you didn't actually put any time into it and didn't really think it through, right? Didn't have somebody look at it. Now, you know, proactively we try to fix this through funding lab. Like I look at every cap table, make sure that everything is correct and all that. But you know, those are things that you should definitely do. The whole point of diligence is for investors to try to catch you in a lie. Investors always try to catch founders in a lie because that's an easy way for them to pass on your deal. Because if they catch you in a lie, right, then you know they know you're not trustworthy and they don't want to do business with you. So if you tell them that you have an agreement, or if you close a sale with XYZ company and that agreement with that XYZ company is not in your data room, then it looks like a lie, right? So you know, always try to under promise and over deliver when it comes to that, and make sure that you get everything in writing, right? All of your contracts, agreements, all that. There's another question here. Maybe I did not get. Is all your services being free to alumni? Yes, 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 yes. This is all part of the package of being an FI alumni. As I mentioned before, we only win if you win big. And so our whole entire system and process and alumni success system is designed to help you grow. And so all of these other programs are designed to help you get there faster and in a more efficient way. Okay, so there's another question here from Steve. What's the most notable attribute, attitude, personality, business acumen of successful founders who make it to the most advanced program? What stands out to you? You know, perseverance is key, like in everything, right? Whether it's just getting through FI. I know FI is pretty difficult. I've been through it myself. Or you know, whenever you get like an epic sprint, getting through that, like perfect perseverance is the most important thing. Let's just take, you know, since we were just earlier talking on about fundraising, and it's just something that's fresh on my mind. As I mentioned before, the average founder right now worldwide pitches 100 investors to close. 100. Right now, all of you are going to finish FI probably, and as a result of that, maybe you're above average. Okay, so you're going to pitch 70. Okay, 60 to 65 of those investors are going to tell you no. And they're probably going to tell you that your business sucks for whatever reason, right? This is just what investors do, right? But you have to be able to persevere through that and not get put down by is like, oh, this investor who supposedly knows about startups more than me or whatever. No, right? You know, you need to kind of like take ownership and say, no, I believe in this, and this is why, and this is why I believe that this will work. And eventually, 5 people maybe will say yes to you, right? So like perseverance is key. Like that's probably the most successful attribute. Um, Ignacio asked a question. I know the portfolio is broad, but could you please share maybe one example of a success case with, a biotech company on Funding Lab? Yeah. So, Ignacio, we recently had a company. So, a medical device company. This is the closest one I have so far that went through Funding Lab. We haven't had many biotech companies actually go through Funding Lab, to be honest with you, just because, just we haven't had that many apply yet, right? But we had a medical device company ended up closing their round, and they're also going to do another round now, probably about $1 million. As a matter of fact, for those of you who haven't seen it, you should probably tune in to our virtual demo day on Tuesday. Antibiotics will also exhibit there. They're basically doing essentially a swallowable robot with propulsion system. It has to go through the FDA, classic, like medical device, hard tech type of business. So we'll definitely take a look at that. So yeah, that's another one there. Any other questions for anybody? If you don't want to use the chat room, feel free to unmute yourself. I know some of you have dialed in, so that's okay too if you want to just like unmute yourself and ask any sort of questions. Also, by the way, everybody, no pressure. Like, we don't have to take the whole entire hour here. I just wanted to keep it open just in case you all have questions about various things. So if you feel like you got another, if you're done with your questions and things like that, it's okay to like log off too. It won't hurt my feelings or anything like that. So don't worry about it. I know your time is valuable, right? So I want to make sure it's a good use of your time. Another question from Colombia here in the chat room. Some people recommend a more organic growth. So what are the main reasons to look for big amounts of funding for startups? So usually funding is a trailing indicator, not a leading indicator, Andreas. So, it's rare that somebody will raise money before growth. Okay, the only rare exception are hard tech, deep tech kind of companies, possibly some of the biotech, like the companies. Sometimes they're able to go and raise money before that. And the reason that they're able to raise money before traction is because it's not debatable. If this thing actually works, it will get traction, right? And it will be a very, very large business. So for example, let's just use this very hypothetical example. If I figure out what the cure for cancer is, it's not debatable that that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, right? It's just not debatable. It's going to happen, right? So that the risk of customer acquisition, growth, all that, you could just table that because it's not necessary. So it's okay to kind of fund that beforehand. For everybody else, that's just not the case. You basically have to show execution. So if you're building a marketplace, right, your risk is 100% execution, right? Because what's a marketplace, right? A marketplace is one person facilitating a transaction with another person, right? That's what a marketplace is. You technically don't even need a product. Airbnb didn't need a product, right? They basically were able to facilitate more or less these transactions manually. They put up like this kind of like crappy like landing page, and they were able to get some leads, and then they just started like kind of matching people up, right, without a product, right? So that's what traction looks like, right? And so organic growth is the best form of growth, obviously, right? That's what you need. But what ends up happening sometimes is, and this happens a lot in tech, is that generally if a market is really good and to finish FI, you basically have to go after a pretty good market, otherwise you just won't finish the program. You know what I mean? So all of you are by definition going after a really good market. Once you figured out how to do it, so let's say you figured out product market fit and this thing is actually working, you can't like you almost need to turn away customers because you can't support them. It's like growing so fast for you. At that point, other competitors will probably take note, right? And they will also be able to kind of copy a lot of the stuff that you've done. And will also want to try to scale, right? So there is value in raising money, right? The whole idea of raising money is that so you can take over the market faster than anybody else, right? And that's the whole kind of like the idea of like venture capital and all that. That being said, it's all good if you don't do that either, right? There's been a lot of very successful businesses that have been built off of revenue for a very long time, and so, you know, if you can build an enduring business off the bat with just, off of revenue to start, that puts you kind of in a pretty good position to either raise money or not, right? So it's okay either way. There's a question here from Jeremy. Can you share the slide deck from this meeting so that we can share it out with our cohort Slack channel? Yeah, sure, happy to do it. I'm also recording this, Jeremy, so there will be a link as well. So we'll definitely be sending this out to everybody else. Other questions? How solid does your MVP need to be for Funding Lab? And is traction a must? So for most companies, traction is a must. I would say that. Like, as I said, there is some exceptions to this, but that's really for companies that are mostly building like deep tech, right? So we had a quantum computing company go through Funding Lab, raise $1.5 million as a result of Funding Lab. But they were like the top 3 experts in quantum computing, and they had some pretty hardcore IP. And if they actually figure this out, right, for 100%, it's not debatable that this is going to be a big business, or that a Google or IBM would want to maybe take them over, right? So again, as I mentioned, it depends on how risky your go-to-market is, right? Like in this case, it's not debatable, right? But other than that, right? So pretty much for 98% of founders that finish Founder Institute, you should be able to show traction. And you should do this for yourself. It's not even about investors, right? Like, look, investors don't want to fund product development. What they want to fund is growth, right? And so, and it makes sense. That's how it should be, essentially, right? Like, once you raise money from investors, you essentially set yourself on this pretty binary outcome. Either your business is going to be a smashing success, or it's going to fail. There's no middle ground, really, right? So you want to make sure that you align yourself with your investors if you do go down this path. Otherwise, it's just not a good alignment. It's going to cause a lot of problems for you, right? And so you should also kind of see the growth potential of the business and how it's kind of growing. So you're much better off right now focusing on trying to basically get customers to use your product, and then going out to go and raise money. And by the way, this is part of why we do the entire Funding Lab application process. We try to help you through this as well, right? It's, we would like to help everybody raise money, but we want to make sure that you're in the right position to do so. And so part of what we look at is, where is the company located, right? Because we have pretty good data about like what the investor appetite is for that type of business in that particular market, and what investors are looking for to see at that particular junction in time, right? And we'll be able to see how developed the product needs to be in order for you to kind of like actually show that realistic traction. So back to kind of like the MVP thing. Well, as I mentioned, if you're doing a company that is not really product driven, or is not really based on product as much, maybe it's not as important. Like if you're building a marketplace and you're showing that your transaction volume is growing 30% month over month, and you have thousands of transactions, and you're still kind of doing them somewhat manually right now, but for the most part it's working, you're generating revenue, your unit economics are positive, cost of customer acquisition is low, you will probably have a pretty good shot at raising money from investors. In other cases you may not, like maybe if you're building a high-end consumer app, where it's all about like the design, and then you probably need to be able to show that, right? So it just kind of depends on the business and what you're up to and the kind of company that you're trying to build. So just something to think about when you do that. But yes, you definitely need to be able to show that people want this, and you need to be able to show this to yourself, because if you can't show this to yourself and you're not confident that this will work, then there's no way you're going to be able to exude that type of confidence in convincing an investor to fund your business, right? If you think about just the kind of risk an investor has to take to fund your business, maybe that's a better way to kind of think about it, right? Like, an investor has to like believe that they're going to get 10 to 20 times their money back on the investment that they make. The reason for that is because um, the most likely scenario is that they will lose all their money, because at the end of the day, if you were to look at a business from first principles, a business is a collection of people and contracts, and people are unpredictable, and that's why most businesses fail. And so if you're like a angel investor that wants to give somebody 25, 50K, whatever, right, at a really, really early stage, right, like, you have to be convinced that this bet, if things go work out, right, is going to be a very large opportunity. And if you can't convince investors in that, they're not going to fund you. Other questions? According to your experience, how much are the investors interested in Latin market? Quite a bit. I mean, we've got companies raising money. I believe you were in Bogota, right? If I'm not, I think so, right? Anyway, Latam, there's definitely a lot of investor interest in Latam. Particularly from local investors. Now, the way you convince them and the way you talk to them and things like that is probably going to be very different than the way you would probably talk to an investor here, mostly because they care more about protecting for the downside, typically, from my experience there. But no, like, we've had companies raise plenty of money in all those jurisdictions just fine. You just got to run a tight process that's targeted at investors that make sense for your business. Any experiences with impact funding? Specific advice for preparing for this investor type? Yeah, it doesn't really work like that. So, as I mentioned before, Javier, the average founder has to pitch 70 to 100 investors, right? And they're generally, especially if you're early, they're most likely going to come from somewhere between a 20 to 30-mile radius up to 50-kilometer radius from where you are located. Okay. And so if you start putting in a lot of filters on them, right? I need an impact founder, and they need to be able to invest in uh, consumer enterprise, and they invest this much amount, and they have this location thing. You're not going to find 70 investors, So that's not that's a suboptimal way to kind of look at how you think about like fundraising, right? Like, you still need to talk to a lot of people. I do think that you can build a case, and we've seen this happen with a lot of our more impact-related companies, that impact is a good business strategy, right? So, as a result of that, you're going to build a very big business. But don't kid yourself, right? Investors want you to be able to build a big business, okay? Because otherwise, the risk of putting money in your business is so high that it's just you're much better off putting the money somewhere else, right? And so, impact is a really good way to build a very big business, right? So a big business needs to be able to recruit people, right? That's actually harder to do than to raise money. Most people think raising money is really difficult. Wait till you actually scale and are able to and need to go out and actually recruit people to your team. It's very, very hard, right? So impact is a good way to do that, right? A lot of people care about your mission and things like that. It actually gives you a competitive advantage, right? It can give you a competitive advantage of like positioning and how you acquire customers and things like that, right? So I would think more in terms of like how the impact angle helps you build a very large business, and then it becomes much more appealing to investors as well. what are the three most important things to do success? Alex, can you please rephrase the question? I don't understand what you mean. The three most is it the three most important things that you need to do after you successfully graduate from FI or to successfully graduate from FI? Uh,
Yeah, hi. Yeah,
So if it's to graduate from the Founder Institute, I mean, the number one thing you need to do is you gotta basically like stay on top of everything, and just be on top of it. All the work that we do, there's no busy work there, right? This is everything that every good entrepreneur has gone through, right? So be proactive, stay on top of the work, and go try to go above and beyond. So that's number one. Number two, a lot of people don't take advantage of like the mentor network, right? We basically serve these mentors kind of like on a platter for you. And I see this all the time. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier. I'm also the local leader for Silicon Valley, right? So I also run a chapter too. So I pretty good understanding of kind of what you're going through from that angle too. I see so many founders that don't go to the bar, or don't hang out after class, right? And as a result of that, they're just not meeting the mentors. One of the things that I did when I was going through FI is that I met with every single mentor in the program, and I asked them to kill my business every time. What is it about my business that sucks and all that? And you do that for 14 weeks, right? You kind of figure out all of your objections and things like that, and you get pretty confident with yourself. And that helped me build my team very quickly, helped me raise money very quickly, all this other stuff, right? Plus, a lot of those mentors will probably be your first angel investors. That's what happened with me. That's what happens with a lot of people too, right? And so it's really important that you basically take advantage of like the mentor network and try to do that and as much as possible with getting them involved with them as well. And then last, lean on your local leaders, right? They're there to help. They set up office hours, and you should use that because they also want to help you graduate and finish the program. So be proactive rather than reactive with them as well. What is the best way to network with other alumni in the US and worldwide? Does FI support alumni networking chats, channels to look for co-founders, partners, share events, experiences? Okay, and this is from Elena. Okay, so once you've finished the program, your profile and your system will change, and you will have two basic, really good search tools. One is the mentor network, and then the other one is the alumni network. So you'll be able to kind of see which the alumni are and things like that, and you'll be able to go out and reach out to them directly. The cool thing is about founders, and I found this myself, just from doing it as well, is just founders want to help founders, right? I mean, every founder's been helped out. So many of our founders end up either becoming mentors at FI, becoming angel investors in some of our companies. Now that, we've been around for 10 years, right? So we've had some pretty good companies, successful companies, right? And so a lot of founders want to help each other out. And so reaching out to founders is a really good way to do so. So that's what I would do if I were you. I would just use these tools, try to come up with a very targeted type of email that actually makes sense. I just want to go for coffee and pick your brain. That's not going to work, right? That's just like a really bad like email, and nobody's going to engage with you. But it's like, hey, so and so founder, I saw that you built this kind of company in this space. I'm also doing something in a similar space. I would love to get your advice on how you acquired XYZ customer, right? Or something very specific like that. That's actually really helpful. That's also, by the way, to the first question from Javier as well. Whenever you ask questions in your Q&A and Founder Institute and beyond, always try to relate that to your business, right? When you ask general questions, you get general answers. And that's not very helpful. It might make you feel really good like at that point, but it's just not really actionable feedback. But if you say, look, I'm this company, I've got this company in Bogota, and I'm doing this, and I'm making money like this. How can I improve my cost of customer acquisition? Then you're going to get some much more targeted feedback. So I would do that same approach as you reach out to mentors and alumni and things like that. Looking for co-founders, partners, things like that. Okay, well, co-founders are that's a whole nother thing, and we could probably do an entire call on just co-founders. I've actually written a guide specifically on co-founders, and I think you can actually also access it from your own, from the from your founder profile as well. That's more like dating, and so sure, you can definitely find some people at events. You can definitely find people like throughout the FI network that maybe have stopped working on their businesses for whatever reason. But that's the goal there is for you to basically just get somebody on the first date, right? So just think about it like that, and then we can talk about that more offline at some point. All right. So we got four more minutes here, and I really don't want to, I know you guys are really busy, and so just some final questions here that you may have for me or for about the program or anything else. All right, well, I'm gonna hang on here for 4 more minutes until the top of the hour. So feel free to jump off. And if you have any other questions, just stay on and ask them. I'm gonna hang out for like 4 more minutes. So it's up to you when you want to dial in. So, no pressure. Yeah, no problem, everyone. I know I see a lot of people saying thank you. No problem. Yeah, that's great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just curious. So would you say Funding Lab is geared towards US investment, or it doesn't really matter?
No, it doesn't. Again, fundraising doesn't really work like that. As I mentioned before,
Okay.
earlier on, the earlier you are in your business, the closer that investors want to be to your company. So this is you will probably raise it in your local city, wherever you are right now.
Perfect. Okay. Sweet. Okay. All right. Clears it up. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. This was
Yeah, no problem.
super useful call.
Cool.
Okay, Mike, nobody wants to ask another question, but
I was
I
about
have
to.
one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, according to your experience, what is a good way to manage the emotional roller coaster in all this process?
I hear you, man. I mean, most of the office hours that I do, I would say, or at least 50% are more around that versus tactical. It's kind of crazy. And I love doing it too, just because I've been there myself, and that's what we're here for too. Look, the best way to do it is for you to build a support group. So part of the reason we create working groups in the FI experience and all this other stuff is that hopefully you can maintain these relationships as you build your company. And even after the program is over, we actually recommend that you continue to keep meeting together, at least doing a call or something, so that you all can kind of be in touch with each other, because everybody's going through the same thing and are pretty similar stage, more or less, and are experiencing the same stuff. So that's the number one thing I would do. Number two, I would build like a pretty good like advisory board for yourself, like with entrepreneurs that have been in this space, ideally, that you can talk to every month, and that's the second thing that I would do. And third, just know that we're here to help too, so if you're having a challenge or an issue, just email grads@fi.co once you finish the program, and we can do office hours with you as well, and we can talk about various things that come up as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right, everyone. Well, we've reached the top of the hour. Thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to helping you scale your business here really soon. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.